Hello, and welcome to the Hockey Hotbed, presented as always by the Hockey Podcast Network. My name is Nick Brlansky. We have a great show for you guys today. We're continuing to talk about teams that I see on the verge of a breakout season. We talked to Shane Ryan of the Sens Hour last week. We're talking to Jordy Cunningham of the King's Den podcast here, covering the Hockey Podcast Network. He covers the Los Angeles Kings. Jordy, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you? And I'll say right off the bat, Ottawa is not breaking out this season.
No?
No, I don't think so. They haven't signed. They still have to sign Brady, don't they? And that's the whole. He's not happy apparently. So, I don't know about Ottawa. Quite.
Yeah, it would be a long shot, but I like what they did at the end of last season, and I think that might carry over into this season. So I wanted to talk to Shane and get his vibe on it.
Yeah, you're a Pittsburgh guy, but Matt Murray kind of sucked last year.
Oh no, Matt Murray did suck, and Matt Murray sucked the last couple of years. He was in Pittsburgh too. So no, I'm not biased in that matter.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
but I mean,
here to talk about the Kings.
Exactly. So you think the Kings are better off than the Senators? I guess we'll start there.
Absolutely, they are. There's no doubt about that. The Kings have done the rebuild right. I'll tell you that right now. You and I have talked about it a bunch, and now we can just talk about kind of the evolution of it a little bit. The Kings have straight up not been good the last couple of years. But last year, the 56-team season, shorter season, it was kind of a season where anything could happen. And you kind of saw the glimmer a little bit of what this team is going to be. And that was without any of the real top prospects coming yet. And you saw some guys get to make their NHL debut. Some guys play a handful of games in that prospect pool. And you're seeing this incredible prospect pool. You're going to start to see them come to life. And that's so exciting if you're a Kings fan.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you mentioned the prospect pool. It is kind of consensus, one of the top prospect pools in the entire NHL right now. So, I mean, which of these prospects, when you look at, obviously, it is a big list. I'm not going to lie. It is a much bigger list than most teams have when it comes to top prospects. But who do you think will make the biggest impact once they arrive at the NHL level?
Well, to me, you have to start with Quinton Byfield. He played in, I think, 6 games last season. I think he got 1 assist, but his second overall pick, big centerman. To me, he should be the third-line center this season. He's that good that he could just drop in to be the third-line center this season. And I think it could be a bit of a learning curve for sure. But he's too talented, too skilled to not be. And you see when he got drafted, you know how there's always the player comparison when someone gets drafted? His player comparison was onto Kopitar. That's now his teammate. So what better person to learn from as well as a rookie than that?
So you think he's going to make the roster out of camp this year?
I think so, for sure. I really think so. Because just when you look at the roster, you have a bunch of the kind of guys that have been, the young guys that have been on the team for a couple seasons now. Velarde can play center. He'll probably be the fourth-line center. But you have guys like Anderson Dolan who can play center, Elias Anderson, but they can also play the wing. So I think you have the flexibility to play around with it as well. But I think Byfield makes the team out of camp for sure.
That would be something exciting because, again, only 6 games last year. We did get to see a lot of first overall pick Alexis Lafreniere in New York. We saw a lot of Tim Stützle, who was, I believe, the 3rd-round pick. He went to Ottawa. So the next logical step for a lot of people that were looking at that draft in 2020 said that Quinton Byfield in time will be the best out of those 3 guys. We only got to see him for a couple games. He is on the younger side. So this year is probably his chance to show what he can do as a rookie in the league.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. This is definitely Byfield's year to shine. And I think it could be a very interesting rookie race this season because you have Byfield in it. I look at a guy I'm up in Vancouver, even though I cover the Kings, I'm up in Vancouver. I look like a guy that Pokolzin that is really going to challenge for Rookie of the Year. I think the Rookie of the Year could be a very, very interesting this season.
I mean, it is interesting because 4 of the top 5 picks in this year's draft are all going to play at Michigan. So they're all automatically out. So it's all going to be guys that are coming up. Yeah. So it's all going to be guys that are coming up from the minors, getting their start, guys that played a year or 2, maybe in junior before they came up. So it's guys that have been in their systems for a little while as opposed to a guy that just gets drafted and plays automatically.
Yeah, exactly. And you see, and it wasn't just Byfield that got his cup of coffee. There were a couple guys that played one game and they came up and scored in it. Arthur Kaliev. People will remember him from the World Juniors, last World Juniors. That was or 2 World Juniors ago now, whatever it was.
No,
he was.
It was the last one.
Yeah, the last one. He was dominant in the tournament. Same with Turcotte. Never even got called up yet. He's another guy that Kings fans have to look forward to. Guys like Rasmus Kupari, Samuel Fajmo. These guys are just gonna come in and make an impact. These young guys, and it's really exciting for a Kings fan to have this kind of prospect pool.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned Kaliev and Turcotte, and those are two guys that, because of the World Juniors and because I do root for the United States, I saw a lot of them during that 2 weeks, and they were actually on a line together for the most part, which is probably even more exciting if you're from LA and watching that.
Exactly.
But they played so well in that tournament together.
Yeah.
When do you think they're going to make the jump to the NHL? Kaliev, of course, had his cup of tea last year, and Turcotte looking to probably do the same this year. Do you think they both make it this season?
And I would argue the only reason Turcotte didn't do it is he got hurt last year. I think it was during the World Championships or sometime during the season. That's the only reason why I think he didn't get his chance last year. So I could definitely see them getting a call up, and because I can also see a scenario where the Kings they believe in all the young guys, but I can see a scenario where they kind of get impatient with some of the young guys as well that have been there for a little bit, Elias Anderson is going to be in his second year in LA, but he's been in the league for 4 years now because he was 7th overall for the Rangers a few years ago. A guy who's a Kings guy through and through, Jared Anderson-Dolan. He is a guy that they really like him, but can he take that step forward? That's yet to be seen. He's a guy that only has 1 more year left on his deal before he's an RFA sort of thing. So guys like that, I can see the Kings maybe get a touch impatient with them and want to see the young guys come up. It all depends how they perform in Ontario this year as well with the Ontario Reign.
I mean, and it does help though having such a deep prospect pool, because you can call on some of those guys and try to push the envelope with some of those guys. Even if you're impatient with some, you still have so many that if you are patient with the rest of them, you don't risk messing up your entire prospect pool just for being impatient on a couple of studs.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And also with the depth of the prospect pool and how good these players are, I think it's time to kind of give up, for lack of a better term, on what I call the stopgap players. We don't need Marty Firk in the lineup. They re-signed Athanasiou, which I get. He was a good stopgap player last year, but I really don't know if he's going to end the year with the team. If these young kids kind of push for spots, So I think that's something that's very interesting, and I think that's something you can kind of push a little harder more with how deep the prospect pool is.
Mm-hmm.
Not every team has that luxury to do that, and I think the Kings could.
Yeah, and also with all of that, and you have all these young players that are getting ready to come up, getting ready to get their first kind of taste of the NHL. You have a goaltender, on the other hand, that has played in parts of 3 seasons in the NHL. And now it seems like he's set to have his first full season as the Kings' #1 goaltender, and that's Cal Peterson. Now, he has been pretty impressive up to this point. If you look at his numbers, they look really good, especially on a Kings team that hasn't been that successful in total. Yeah. But at the same time, he's played no more than 35 games this season. So what do you expect from him in his first full year as the Kings' #1?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. But what we've seen so far, he definitely is kind of the goaltender of the future. And there has been I've talked so much about the goaltending, about I believe in Cal Peterson. I thought Jonathan Quick might have got picked by Seattle. I cannot believe Seattle took Curtis McDermott. Thank God he's off this team. But at the same time, I really like that they took Brent Clark. He's going to be a really good defenseman for this team. But I thought that they might have gone. There was that goaltender that was supposed to go top 10 and he didn't go till 20th. I forgot his name. Mm-hmm. That was something that I thought the Kings might look at if they want to finally move off Quick and kind of have to build up in case Cal Peterson doesn't work out over this next couple of years. But the way he's played, there's no reason why he won't work out. I think he's going to have a great year, and I think he's going to open up a lot of eyes around the league this season.
I think when you look at the moves that general manager Rob Blake has made in the past, and one of the big ones is trading Jack Campbell to Toronto, because Jack Campbell was also finding success in LA. But that really, when he did that, it wasn't because, oh, we think Jonathan Quick is back. It was because, hey, we really like this Cal Peterson guy.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it was. And it was, Jack Campbell was a bit of a late bloomer, and it was kind of fits the mold for Toronto. Like Toronto and LA make trades, seems once yearly, once a year. And that one was just like trading Jack Campbell was a need that Toronto needed, right? So it worked out in the end, and of course they believed in Cal Peterson. And Cal Peterson after this season, he went and dominated the World Championships as well. So there's no all the Kings on the USA team except for Anderson Dolan, I believe, really kind of dominant. No, Anderson Dolan's Canadian, I think. There was another one though that there were I think 4 Canadians on the USA team, and they all dominated, or 3 out of 4 of them dominated or something. So there's no reason why they're not going to be successful this season, especially Peterson.
Well, we are talking to Jordy Cunningham of the Kings Den about the chances of the Los Angeles Kings, a very young team. And we've talked a lot about prospects to this point, but we're going to take a quick break. When we return, we'll talk about some of the elders of the group, some of the older LA Kings. There's not many of them left, but we will have that discussion right after the break. Welcome back to the Hockey Hotbed, presented by the Hockey Podcast Network, as well as DraftKings. Make sure you use promo code THPN when you visit the DraftKings Sportsbook app for great odds and opportunities. One last time, that is code THPN at DraftKings Sportsbook. And if there is no DraftKings Sportsbook and no sports betting in your state and or province, you can use code THPN for great opportunities at DraftKings Daily Fantasy. Again, promo code THPN. We're here with Jordy Cunningham, that is, of the Kings Den, who covers the Los Angeles Kings for the Hockey Podcast Network, talking about a team that, in my opinion, is primed to have a really good season and to get out of the basement, if you will, because they've been there for a couple of years. They've been rebuilding. We talked about the prospects in the first segment. Now in this segment, I want to talk a little bit about the guys that have been there. Specifically, I want to start with Anze Kopitar and Drew Doughty, because they've been through it all with this franchise. I mean, from cup winners to the depths of the rebuild, and now the tail end of the rebuild, and kind of climbing their way back into what they're hoping is contention this year for a playoff spot. How important is the presence of those two guys for this young team?
It's super important. These guys they're so important to this team. Of Kopitar, he's been the guy forever, and we mentioned him in the first half about the comparison that Byfield has to him. And you see, Kopitar keeps getting older, but the play isn't diminished, despite how bad the team has been the last couple of years as well. Last year, he played in all 56 games. He was just under a point-a-game player. He had 50 points in 56 games. He doesn't quite score as much. He's more on the assist part of things now. But what he brings to this team, the leadership, the competitiveness, the willing to show the young guys what needs to be done day in and day out. He's just so important to this team. And the year before, 62 points in 70 games. He's so important up the middle. Finished the season with his 1,000th career point. He's so important to this team. An LA King for life. And what's kind of crazy is you're the number one center on a not good team the last couple seasons, and he stayed remarkably close to an even rating on the ice. And this is a guy, he's just the heart and soul of this team. There's no really other way to put it. Just the leadership, and the leadership he brings to the young guys, it's going to really help the young core of this group.
Mm-hmm. Now, Drew Doughty, on the other hand, he's not putting up quite the numbers that Anze Kopitar is, but I feel like there's been a lot of disrespect for Drew Doughty just because he hasn't been at the levels that he once was. But he has still been able to put up some pretty decent numbers offensively at least. I haven't really watched a lot of LA Kings hockey, to be completely honest, but it seems like a lot of people are down on Drew Doughty. Do you think that is justified, or do you think that is just completely overblown?
So if you asked me that 2-3 years ago, I would say it's fair.
Mm-hmm.
Now I disagree. Like, people just want to hate Drew Doughty just to hate Drew Doughty, just because of the personality he is.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's just not right now, because there was a couple of years where he wasn't very good. Like, he struggled. Like, the one year, 2 seasons ago, the 2018-2019 season, you're a top defenseman and you're minus 34. Like, that's not good.
Yeah.
But that season, he still had 45 points. Like, 2 seasons in the COVID short season, he had 35 points in 67 games. So it kind of like wasn't as good, but like he was better than people were saying. And then last season, in the short 56 game season, I think he really like kind of proved the doubters wrong. Like, he had 34 points for a defenseman in 56 games. He was up there in points for a defenseman.
Mm-hmm.
And he was up there for points in defenseman. I believe 8 goals was up there for his division as well. Like, and like Kopitar, like they were in a division last year with Vegas and Colorado. And Kopitar was like right near the top scorers for the forwards, and Doughty was right near the top scorers for the defensemen. Like, the kind of hatred on Drew Doughty, you can't really justify that anymore, because he could have been in the argument for like a comeback player of the year last year, because he played that well, in my opinion. He played really, really well, and I think because it's LA right now and like they haven't been very good, no one has really noticed how good he was last season.
Yeah, I noticed at some point last season, I remember I looked at the numbers and I saw Drew Doughty's numbers, and I was kind of surprised. I was like, is Drew Doughty good again? Like, I didn't. And then I watched and I was like, the defensive play might not be what it was, but he's still producing offensively. And I was like, this Kings team has not produced much offensively all year. So to see him continuing to be able to put the puck in the back of the net, to start plays the way he was able to, that was surprising.
And in these years where they haven't been good, their points from the defense have been horrendous. And I think part of that was because, like, every year Doughty is number 1 or number 2 in ice time. He plays like 28 minutes, 29 minutes a night. It's like what he averages. That is crazy. No wonder he's dead out there. Look at what he's playing. So like, when I think in part of it as well as last season, he got to trust his defensemen more. I think he really like developed a better relationship with the young guys. He's always liked the young guys that they brought in. Tobias Bornfoot, Mikey Anderson. He really likes those guys. Matt Roy, of course, is a stud. And I think that he kind of learned to trust these new defensemen a little bit more that were so young. And of course, he's a great leader for them as well. But I think he learned to trust them a little bit better last year, and that really helped his play.
So we've talked a lot about the players that have been there before. We've talked a lot about the young players that are in the system that are getting ready to possibly make an impact on the team. I also want to look at the offseason the Kings had, because they added, surprisingly, 2 pretty solid forwards to their group in Philip Deneau and Victor Arvidsson. Is this Rob Blake making the statement that this team is done rebuilding and ready to shoot for a playoff spot?
Absolutely, for sure. Like, this was kind of the offseason to make the move, and there were rumors of like trying to trade for Eichel, and like it made sense to some people. To me, I was kind of like, just wait on the prospects. Like, I know Jack Eichel is a generational talent, but let's wait on the prospects instead of trading for them away for a player with a neck problem. I know he's one of the best, but still, he's a player with a neck problem. Neck problems aren't great. So let's not do that. And like, to bring in like Philip Deneau, had a great year with Montreal last year. He had a great 2-way center. Like, him and Kopitar are, I'm not going to say the same player, because Kopitar's had a very illustrious career. But the gameplay, like they're both 2-way forwards, 2-way centermen. That you have to have that. Deneau just had a great year in Montreal last year. And when you look at the stats, like, well, first of all, Arvidsson, it's a great trade. Guys kind of didn't quite have the numbers last couple seasons in Nashville. He gave up, what was it, a 2nd and a 3rd round pick for him? it was a pennies on the dollar trade,
Mhm.
and Rob Blake is great at those. And to see like Victor Arvidsson scored 30 in a season before, and what I think is so important is I looked at their stats, Arvidsson and Deneau, to have two guys that are relatively the same age that have put up relatively the same numbers come to the same team. I think that's huge. There are two guys that are like late 20s now.
Mhm.
That's just kind of hitting their prime. That's kind of what you want, and they're such huge additions to the team, and it feels like for the first time in a long time, it feels like a proper top six now. It really does, because you're going to have Kopitar probably centering Iafallo and Brown, maybe, and then you're going to have Deneau centering Arvidsson, and then probably Adrian Kempe or Trevor Moore. So I really think like it's a legit top six now, in my opinion.
And it also, when you look at these guys, they're both players that I know I don't like to talk too much about intangibles and eye test and stuff like that. But when you have a team so young, like the Kings do, I get that you have Stanley Cup presence when it comes to, Browns and the Kopitars and the Doughties and the Jonathan Quicks even in the goaltending arena. You have Stanley Cup experience there. But the players you're bringing in, this kind of second tier, not the older guys, not the younger guys, but right in the middle, in Deneau and Arvidsson, they've both had some pretty stout playoff experience on their own right. Philip Deneau, of course, going to the finals last season with the Montreal Canadiens, and Victor Arvidsson a couple of years ago with the Nashville Predators. So you have guys that have been there before. You have guys that are in their prime right now. And especially looking at the fact that you're going to have Kopitar, Deneau, and possibly Byfield as your 1, 2, 3 down the middle, that's something that when I look at that just reeks of a playoff team. And that's something I haven't been able to say about the Kings the last couple of seasons.
Absolutely. And you talk about the playoff experience as well. Like, Deneau has 38 career playoff games. I know the majority of them were this last year. But then you look at Victor Arvidsson, and you don't realize how long he's been with Nashville and how much he helped, like, when Nashville was really good the last few years. He's played in 61 playoff games, Victor Arvidsson. Like, if I had to look it up, that's probably, I would guess, 6th on the team, behind all the Kings that have been there: Kopitar, Doughty, Quick, Brown. I'm missing one, and like Alex Edler has played in like a million playoff games with the Canucks. So I would say like he's probably I'd have to look that up, but he's going to be high up there in playoff games played. Like, he brings experience in that regard as well for still kind of being relatively a young guy.
And I feel like his favor ran out in Nashville. I think they were kind of done using him in the way they needed to use him. Also, he had some injuries in the past couple of years that sidelined him, made it a little bit more difficult for him to find his footing. So a fresh start. I mean, when you talk about guys that need a fresh start, Arvidsson was at the top of the list going into the offseason. And because of the Seattle Kraken expansion, Rob Blake, like you said, pennies on the dollar, a great move there. And there were a couple around the league, but this was one of the ones that kind of was where the shots heard around the world, especially leading up to the expansion draft.
Yeah, and it was so early in the offseason as well. It was like a couple weeks before the expansion draft. So, like, it was a guy that the Kings obviously had targeted. And the pennies on the dollar, like I said, like the last 2 seasons, Arvidsson kind of struggled a little bit. Like 28 points in 57 games and then 25 points in 50 games. Like, not the numbers he's kind of used to putting up. And I think the injuries kind of affected that as well. So I think he's a huge bounce back candidate this season. I think a fresh start's really going to help him. Yeah,
and I think also bringing in these two guys, Deneau obviously not as much on the scoring side, but Victor Arvidsson, he's going to help get that goal total up. And in a Pacific Division where there's not going to be a lot of goals scored, that's what can help push them towards a playoff position.
In a weak Pacific Division.
Yeah,
very weak.
It is a weak division. So I would imagine from what you're saying there, are the LA Kings a team that could potentially be in the playoffs at the end of this year?
Let's see. You look at the Pacific Division. Anaheim, not good.
No.
San Jose, not good.
No.
Can McDavid carry a team by himself to the playoffs? I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop for a second. Edmonton's offseason was so confusing what was that offseason they just put together? Like Calgary, I really don't think is very good either. I think they could be loading up for Eichel last minute, but you and I have both watched Eric Branson play for our teams. Sorry, Canucks personally here. That guy stinks, and they just signed him. And Blake Coleman's nice, but they need bounce backs from a lot of players. This is a little bit biased, but I think people around the league kind of notice this as well. The Canucks had a good offseason. And it was risks that they took, but overall they had a good offseason. I think most people agree with that. And Vegas is Vegas. So the Kings could be a playoff team because this division is so weak. This season is going to be so interesting to me.
Okay, well, coming from the perspective of a Pacific Division guy, in your opinion, do you think Seattle is a team that you're going to have to worry about fighting with that spot?
Seattle was so frustrating, and I guess it's because you kind of expected a Vegas off season or first off season, and it just never really happened. There were so many good players available, and they just didn't do it. And they give Grubauer a bunch of money, who's good, and they went heavy defensive, but I really don't know how good Seattle's gonna be. I really don't. I didn't love what they did building their team. I really didn't.
When I look at this division, I do think that Calgary is not going to be good enough. I don't think Calgary is going to be good enough. Vancouver, they're magic beans. I have literally no idea what to expect from Vancouver. I thought they were going to be great last season, but we saw what happened there. So when I look at Seattle and I look at Los Angeles, those are two teams that, Los Angeles historically has been defense-based, scored just enough goals.
Yeah.
Seattle built their team that it looks like it's defense-based. We're going to try to score just enough goals.
Yeah, it's true. We have a young defenseman here who I really like in Cal Peterson. The Kings left him available, and Seattle took Curtis fucking McDermott when that guy is just so bad. And I can't believe Colorado traded for him. That was even more shocking to me. I just couldn't believe that.
Yeah, Seattle was definitely a lot of head scratchers throughout the summer because of them and from them. But when it comes to the LA Kings, man, I liked their offseason. I'm not going to say they were my favorite offseason. Anybody that's listened to this show or listened to the Tip of the Iceberg or just follows me on Twitter knows that I think the New Jersey Devils had the best offseason personally. But
they had a good one.
Kind of just small moves by the Kings that they're the right moves. You bring in a guy like Philip Deneau, you pay the money to get a top 2 line center, and then you bring in a guy like Victor Arvidsson for pennies on the dollar. With the guys that you have coming up as prospects, that's all you needed to do.
Absolutely, and with the prospects, absolutely. And minimalistic's not the right word, but the Kings made the moves that they just needed to make. They made 2 signings, Deneau and Edler. By the way, it's going to be really weird to see Edler in different colors. They make 2 signings in Deneau and Edler. They make the trade for Victor Arvidsson, pennies on the dollar, 2nd and 3rd round pick. And then going into the draft, I think it was 8 or 9 picks they had. And they were like, we don't want to stockpile players because we have that. They said we want quality over quantity. So all they did was keep trading up during the draft to get the players that they wanted. So I think they had 8 picks and they only made 4 selections. They just kept trading up because they wanted the players they wanted. So it was kind of a quality over quantity draft wise, and then the offseason it was just the moves that we need to make because we trust the young guys, and it was honestly a perfect offseason for them. Yeah,
it seemed like a lot of precision moves, a lot of things that were very calculated on Rob Blake's. Yeah,
great word for it. Rob Blake is such a good GM. He knows how to rebuild the team. And just the minor moves he makes here and there, it really helps out.
Well, thank you, Jordy, so much for joining us. I think we're gonna call it just before a half hour. Let our listeners know where they can find you what they can expect here coming up with the season just around the corner on the King's Den.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. Check out the King's Den on Twitter at the King's Den THPN. All we're going to be doing is talking about the Kings all season long. I love to give game recaps as the season goes on. It's going to be an exciting year, man. Seeing this team grow It's going to be – this is a big step-up year for the Kings, and especially in a weak division, they could really have a step-up, and we're going to talk about every single bit of it on the Kings Den. And also, follow me on Twitter. My personal is @Cunningham Jordy, so check me out there.
Well, Jordy, one last time, thank you so much for joining the show. It's always fun getting you on. The last time I talked to you on a format like this was the trade deadline, and we broke a trade.
I was just going to say that, the Jeff Carter trade.
No such luck today, but we did have a good time. But thank you so much for coming on.
It's not great that he's currently your second-line center to start the season. But
I mean, he's the first-line center.
Brother. That's not great.
Yeah, definitely heads are rolling in Pittsburgh, but
yeah,
that is going to do it for this episode of the Hockey Hotbed. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you guys on Friday.